Okay, so let's officially get started here on class. I'll record those in Moodle, so you'll see those come up. Yeah, hopefully tomorrow. I have to figure out how to use the grade function of Moodle. So yeah, I just have to figure out how to do that, and then you'll see those things appear. Okay. So let's begin here. Let's begin. Okay. Nope, not right. There we go. Yes. So on Friday, we were in the middle of Your Inner Fish with Neil Shubin, right? And I had some questions for you to answer on basically the first part of our documentary, which had to do a lot with non-human primates, right? For the most part, we met primates and learned some things about ourselves based on those earlier forms of life, right? And so let me just pull up those questions so I have them in front of me. Oh, let me just pull those up so I have them in front of me. There we go. Right. So, first off, what did we say was so interesting or special? Okay, I'm gonna wait for the back row there because I'm kind of limited, because usually, if you'd seen me teach before, I move around quite a bit. I walk up and down, and it kind of allows me to kind of make sure my voice is reaching everyone. But of course, I can't really do that anymore because I'm trying to stay on camera. Also, it's easier for me not to infect you, although I don't have any COVID here, but easier for me not to infect you or to be infected by you if I just kind of stay here. But of course, the downside is that I have to really project my voice, and I've got a mask on, which makes it even more difficult. So again, if people are talking in the back row and I'm trying to project to you, but I'm also trying to talk over you, I'm totally going to burn out my voice, and of course, it's going to be difficult for people to hear. So you guys got to help me out and keep it down, okay? So the first thing was, what was so interesting or special about primate hands? What's different about our hands? Opposable thumbs, right? So most animals don't have a digit here that can grasp around, right? And that's a pretty interesting innovation. Why is it so useful for primates? We can hold food, but we can hold branches. Yeah, specifically what kind of branches? Tiny little ones, right? And this is a very useful thing because Neil points out, if you look at animals that have, let's say a cat, right? Cats have little paws, they have claws, they can climb really well, but they can't get out onto narrow branches, right? They can walk, but then if it gets too thin, they're sort of stuck, right? But a primate can go all the way out onto the ends of the branches. And what's there? Ripe fruit, flowers, insects, yeah, all kinds of things, all kinds of food sources. So those animals that have short toes and sharp claws can go up the trunk of the tree, but they really can't get out to the ends of the branches, right? But primates can, right? And this is a very useful thing for primates to do. They have access now to a whole other food source that some animals can't get at, right? And again, that's a very useful and helpful thing for animals to survive and pass on their genes, right? Access to a food source that no one else can get to, right? Think of giraffes, right? Those big tall giraffes with the long neck. They can reach food that other animals can't get close to. And primates, the same way, right? So they've got these hands that can grasp, right? And of course, a little bit later on, we'll see that these hands are going to be very, very useful for us as we evolve, but we'll get there, okay? Second question I asked you was the acquiring of full color vision. Again, something that most animals don't have, but we do. Why is something like that so useful? Yeah, you can spot different types of foods, but specifically you can identify whether fruits are ripe from a long distance, right? It's very easy for you to identify them. And what's the difference between a ripe fruit and an unripe piece of fruit?
There's more nutrients in the ripe one.
Yeah, more nutrients and more calories, right? The fiber that's in a unripe fruit, it converts to sugar eventually, right? And that's more calories, more energy, right? If you can figure out which fruits have the most energy and eat them, are you going to survive better? Yeah, or do you have a better chance of passing on your genes? Yeah, so not only can these primates access food sources that other animals struggle to reach, but now they can identify the best ones, right? And visually, they can just, they know where to go, right? Very useful, very helpful. And was it a big deal to evolve color vision, or does it seem to have been very complicated? Yeah, just a very simple gene copying error and maybe a couple of mutations, and suddenly some primates develop a protein in their eye that can actually is sensitive to that lower wavelength of light, right? And then what did Jay Knight show us about the connection between that opsin and the brain? Did the brain need to learn how to interpret this new signal? No, right? And again, this is, I don't know about you guys, but to me, this is almost magical, right? Is that the brain knows what to do with this, right? Because think about it. You've got your eye, right? You've got your eyeball. You've got a bunch of proteins on the back that are sensitive to certain wavelengths of light. And when certain wavelengths of light hit it, there's a little tiny electrical signal. But then somehow your brain knows what to do with that. Somehow your brain knows how to construct this picture in front of you based on all these little electrical signals, right? How does it know how to do that? And how does it know how to do it when it gets a brand new type of signal that it's never experienced before? But all of a sudden, it sees it, right? It sees red, right? Or it sees green when it never saw green before. But it knows, right? The brain knows how to deal with that. How? I don't know. I don't know if Jay Knights knows, but it's a very interesting question, right? And it's interesting how, again, something that seems so complicated is actually not a big evolutionary step, right? And very quickly, one branch of primates could have developed this ability to see color, and again, probably would have passed it on because it's a big advantage, right? It's a big advantage being able to see those ripe fruits, right? Very cool. Just before we finished on Friday, we met Lucy, and I was going to say who or what, but let's go with who. Who is Lucy? Okay, hands up because I'm hearing muttering and I don't know where it's coming from because everybody's masked, so it could be coming from anywhere. Actually, that's pretty good because somebody, like, if you could just go like, Mike, you're a jerk, and nobody would know who said it, and I'd be like, guys, no, don't do that. Okay, hands up. No, you guys. Okay, who's Lucy?
She was the first primate to walk on two legs.
Okay, she's the first or one of the first primates to walk on two legs.
The way she walked was different from the others of her brothers and sisters, I don't know.
Yeah.
She used to walk properly rather than walking like this,
Yeah.
like on the both sides, but she used to walk properly.
Yeah.
Synchronized walking, you can say.
Yeah, so and what you're talking about is the anatomy of Lucy's pelvis, so your kind of hip bones, the anatomy of that, and how your upper leg bones, your femora, how those kind of articulate with the pelvis, right? And so in a lot of apes, it's kind of a right angle situation, right? You've got the pelvis, and then you've got the two leg bones kind of going straight up and down, right? But with Lucy and with us, that angle is more like this, right? And so they showed us, and I think I awkwardly showed you here, that kind of allows you to walk in a much more efficient manner, right? It keeps you from having to throw your center of gravity all over the place in order to walk. You can keep your center of gravity fairly central, and you can move, and you can use gravity in order to walk, right? Because you just lift up your leg, and then you kind of fall forward and catch yourself, right? And again, if you can cheat a little bit, if you can use gravity, it makes walking this way very efficient, right? If you look at a chimpanzee, man, they're gonna get tired ambling around. I'm getting tired just doing this, right? That's a lot of work. Chimpanzees won't walk that far because it's just, it uses a lot of energy. Same thing with animals that are on 4 feet, right? Animals that are on 4 feet aren't super efficient in their walking because if they just lift their leg up, nothing, right? They've got to pull themselves kind of along the ground in order to move. It makes them fast, right? Animals on 4 feet are super fast, but they use up a lot of energy. So they've got to run really fast and then cool it for a while, right? Whereas humans are not fast, right? Even the fastest of us are slow in the animal kingdom. But, well, that's true, right? Who's the fastest runner in the world right now? Is it Usain Bolt? Or at least he was very recently anyway. Let's say it's Usain Bolt. He's the fastest human on the planet, right? But if he went walking in Africa, every animal can catch him. He's the slowest thing out there, right? Leopards, lions, hyenas, anything is faster than Usain Bolt, right? So even the fastest of us are quite slow. So, but that's not our strength, right? Our strength is not speed, it is, and we'll get to this a little bit later, it's endurance walking, right? The ability to walk a long way and not use a lot of energy. So anyway, so Lucy's the first primate to, well, as of 1972, she was the first primate to walk on 2 feet. Does anyone remember how far back this goes? How old she is? 3 point. Yeah. She's about. It is 3.2, right? Okay. Yeah, she's about 3.2 million years ago. Wow. Long time ago, right? And this was exciting because at the time, this was the furthest back that we see a creature that moves like us, right? A creature that has a pelvis, legs, and feet. We didn't talk about feet, but her feet are quite similar to ours as well. So this is a big deal, right? 3 million years ago, we've got an animal that is kind of showing bipedal locomotion, right? Moving around on 2 feet, that kind of looks like us. Although the rest of her, and we saw sort of a computer-generated image of her, the rest of her is really, really ape-like, right? And Don Johansson there, who we're talking to, he says, yeah, I think she'd look like the ape that stood up, you know? So nothing really superhuman about her, just looking like an ape standing on 2 feet, but then walking in a way that's a little more similar to us, right? But still very ape-like. Okay, so I think that brings us to where we are in the documentary, okay? So let me just see. I'm just going to make sure we've got some online people, so I just want to make sure that they have access to the video. Because they need to watch it. So if you're online, the link to the video is in Microsoft, or no, it's in the live chat right there. I've just added it in. And we are, I guess we're about 25 minutes in, right? Is that what we watched on
Oh yeah, like
21? Let me just have a quick look here. I can get us, I think. Okay, I'm going to start us a little bit early. Or am I? No. Okay. Okay, so we're going to watch, I'm going to start us at about 24 minutes, which is just a little bit before we left off, but that's okay. It'll just get us back in the right frame of mind. We'll watch the rest of it. We'll pay attention to the questions, which I gave you last time. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back and answer those questions. Coolio? Cool? Okay. So online people, you should be okay and ready to go as well. Watch from 24 minutes, take a break, and then we'll come back, okay? All right. So Okay. Nope. Not yet. Oh, let's get comfortable here. Okay, thank you. So, we're all done. We missed just the last like minute or two of that, and I'll fill you in. I'm not sure what happened to the video, but it's okay. We didn't really miss anything. So, saw a few more things. We saw the discovery of yet an older species, a species older than Lucy, right, called Artipithecus. And before they talk about Artipithecus, they talk about this traditional theory of how humans began to walk on 2 feet. And what's the traditional theory? Okay, so we were walking kind of on our knuckles like chimpanzees or gorillas do, and then what happened? Climate change, right? We can't get away with it. Even 4 million years ago, still a thing. What does that climate change do? Yeah. Okay, hang on. We got to do the hands. There's too many voices. What's the climate change? How does it change? Yes, sir?
Evolution.
Yeah, that's not how the climate changes, though. Evolution.
That's how the chimpanzees change.
Okay, well, it causes evolution, but how does the climate change, Sabrina?
Like from forests, they end up with savannas, and then they start walking with like 2 feet instead of 4 with their gals.
Right. So the traditional theory is that our ancient ancestors were walking around the forest floor on their knuckles like a chimpanzee or a gorilla. And then the climate changed, right? That area of Africa got warmer, it got drier, and over thousands and thousands of years, a forest kind of dried out and turned into an open grassland, right? So kind of what you think about when you think about Africa in your mind. You think of these open grasslands with lions and giraffes running around. That's kind of what the climate changed to, right? And so the idea here is evolution, right? So the trees that our ancestors used to climb around in were gone, and so they started to walk on 2 feet. But as Neil points out, that Artipithecus species kind of disproves that traditional theory. And why does it disprove that traditional theory? Yeah.
Because Artie was known to have started walking on 2 feet in the woodlands and forests.
Yeah. Yeah, so Tim White not only found Artipithecus, but found a lot of other animal bones around it, right? And he found that, these are not savanna animals, right? These are not open grassland animals. These are all animals that live in the forest. And so Artipithecus, Artie, must have lived in the forest as well, right? So here we have this thing that is walking on 2 feet, but before the climate changed, right? They were already walking on 2 feet before the climate changed. So the climate couldn't have done it, right? The climate couldn't have caused this evolution because we were already there, right? Our ancestors were already walking on 2 feet. And again, not quite the same, not as well as Lucy, right? Kind of a different anatomy that's kind of half bipedal primate and half tree climbing primate, right? Their skeleton is kind of half and half in a few ways, which I'll show you maybe tomorrow or on Friday. But yeah, that traditional theory doesn't seem to work, right? Do they have any idea about why this Artipithecus creature might have been walking on 2 feet? If it's not climate change, what is it?
It's just a different
It's a different type of.
Like mutation of the egg.
Yeah, well, it definitely is, right? There's evolution happening here, right? It's a different kind of adaptation, but again, we're not really sure, right? In evolution, things that are useful get passed on, right? Generation after generation. Things that aren't useful tend to kind of disappear, right? And so not obviously, but clearly walking on 2 feet was useful, right? It was an advantage, but we're just not sure how or why it was an advantage, right? But it must have had some use because it got passed on, right? And so we'll talk a little bit more about Artipithecus ramidus. Yikes, I think I just answered question number 5. But I do that sometimes. But yeah, that's why it's surprising, right? This is a bipedal primate that is bipedal before that change in climate, right? So the climate change didn't cause it, right? The climate change, something else forced it to evolve that adaptation. What was that thing? Hard to know, right? Maybe we'll find out eventually, but currently we're not quite sure, right? He moves on to look at humans, baby humans, right? And they do that test with object permanence, right? Had you heard of object permanence before?
Psychology class.
Psychology, what did they say about it in psychology?
I forgot.
Okay. But they said it.
They said it.
Okay. They said it in psychology class. Yeah, this is as Neil mentions, it's a developmental milestone in humans, right? So the idea is, when does a baby's brain develop to the point that it understands that when they can't see something, that it's still there, right? So for a child who hasn't quite reached this developmental milestone, if I show them this thing and I put it behind here, just like the little baby, it's gone, right? She has no idea where it went, because if she can't see it, she thinks it's vanished, right? Her brain hasn't developed to the point where she realizes, oh yeah, it's still there, it's just behind the thing, right? And of course, we kind of roll our eyes, right? We're duh, of course it's there. But babies don't know that, right? Their brain has to develop to the point where they understand that. That's why peekaboo, that's a fun game with babies, because you're gone, you've literally vanished, and then wow, you're back again, right? And that's why it's fun, right? They think you've disappeared, right? But as we see in the experiment, the monkey is much better, right? That little monkey is the same age as the little baby, and yet the monkey's really fast, right? The monkey knows, yeah, it's right here, right? And so what's going on there? What does Neil say is going on?
So their neurons are more fast working?
The what?
Neurons.
Yeah, what about the neurons?
They are fast working?
They're not so much fast working, although it seems like it would be because that monkey is very fast, but what are they doing quickly? Yeah, they're kind of growing and wiring, right? So our brains we're born, we have a brain in our head, right? And that brain continues to grow and develop throughout our childhood. And so as it continues to grow, it builds new connections. It is influenced in certain ways by its environment, right? Remember, the teaching of language is an important thing to sort of grow the neurons that help us to speak. If we're not taught language at a young age, it becomes very difficult to learn later on because those brain structures don't develop. They're not really there, right? And so, but what's happening in the monkey brain is that its brain is wiring really quickly, right? And once it gets to a certain age, its brain is really going to stop wiring that way, right? It's going to kind of fully set, which is not entirely true, but it's mostly true, okay? But of course, for the monkey, that's going to happen when they're a year old, maybe a year and a half, give or take, maybe 2 years. But for a human, when is that going to start to happen? When the brain is going to start to solidify and stop wiring? Do you know? It's probably closer to your early 20s. And so all of you,
I'm so, wow.
yeah. So all of you, when you're young, your brain is wiring like crazy, right? It's getting all these new inputs and senses, and it's having new language, and it's learning to walk, and the brain is just growing like crazy, right? There's all kinds of new connections and neurons growing. And all the way through school, the same thing happens. But as you get to this part of your life, that slows down, and eventually it's going to not entirely stop, but it's really going to slow down quite a bit, right? So your brain will kind of be fully cooked, if you will. Okay? And so you're kind of getting to that age where that's starting to happen. But again, the monkey was done years ago, right? And so the monkey will kind of experience a limit to what it can do because its brain wires so quickly, right? But humans have the advantage of wiring up really slowly, right? So all of our experiences and all of the things we're taught, those things can continue to influence the development of our brain, right? We can build much more complex brain structures, and we can learn much more complicated things because we're growing at a slower pace, right? Or our brain is wiring at a slower pace, right? And so again, it seems like that should be a disadvantage, right? A long childhood, that's trouble, right? You've got to, the parents of an offspring have to devote many, many years of care just to create an offspring that survives, right? But again, we're able to do so much. We're able to be so adaptable because of that, right? We could never do the things that we do and learn the things that we're able to learn if our brains wired as quickly as the monkey, right? So again, the monkey's very impressive at 3 months, right? Much quicker than the human, right? She just grabs the fruit or whatever it is, and the baby is just have no idea what happened. But that monkey's brain development is going to stop, and Geneva's is going to keep going, right? Up and up and up for years and years and years, right? Which again is another thing that makes humans quite unique, right? That very slow brain development, that really long childhood. No other animal does that, right? So again, you can add that to your list of what makes humans unique. Really long childhoods, right? Again, even when you take into account different lifespans, we still have a long childhood. Now, this is the part that we kind of almost missed, but we'll try to work through it. Neil points out that all brains are have similar structures, right? They have a hind brain and a midbrain and a forebrain, right? But what makes human brains capable of so much more? Why can we do things that other animals can't? And he did mention it a little bit earlier, but did you catch it? What's so different about our brain? Definitely bigger, right? But whales have bigger brains than us, and they're not smarter than us. So size is part of it, but it's not all of it. What's going on in here? What's different? What is it? What's the difference between my brain and other mammal brains? So Simran says here, actually, there's billions of neurons, right? So the neurons we have, the nerve cells we have in our brain, there's an uncommonly high number of them, right? 16 billion is massive, right? That is a lot of neurons packed into a small head. I know my head's kind of big, but even so, that's a lot of neurons packed into a small space. And what else? What else do we know about those neurons that Neil mentioned? He said they were unusually know that's my hand gesture for everything, but I think it works here. He says they're unusually interconnected. Okay, so each neuron is interconnected to. There you go, Simran. They're unusually interconnected, right? So they have connections to other neurons in a way that many animals don't, right? And so their neural pathways are much more direct, right? They go from A to B, but ours have all kinds of different connections, right? And our neural impulses can travel in all kinds of different directions. And it's one of the things that makes the human brain so much more capable, right? Even though we share similar structures, right? Even with that little, what Neil was going to tell us, even with that little amphioxus that was under the microscope, if you look at the amphioxus DNA, if you look at their genes have coding for a forebrain and a midbrain and a hindbrain. And you don't really see it in the amphioxus because their hindbrain is just kind of a long notochord that runs up their body, and their forebrain is just a little bump on the top. And so you don't see anything that looks like a brain, but their DNA is still coding for those three regions, right? And again, all other types of animals, like the shark, cats, dogs, giraffes, monkeys, whatever you want to think of, they all have that similar coding for a hindbrain, a midbrain, and a forebrain. And so it's one of those things where, again, we share kind of an evolutionary relationship, we share a similarity, but that common link that we have has been kind of elaborated in a different way, right? Lots of creatures on Earth, extinct and alive, have 5 things, right? They have 5 toes or 5 fingers or 5 little bones between the membranes of their wings or whatever they are. But they've all just been elaborated a little bit differently, right? The details are different, but the basic structure is the same. See that with our spine as well, right? We have a spine that in many ways is similar to monkeys, but as they mentioned, it's turned up, right? It's turned on its end. And so a lot of the bones have kind of evolved, right? They've been reshaped and remodified, but they allow us to do something that other primates can't do, right? Similar structures, right? The vertebrae are similar, but they're also a little bit different, right? To allow us to do what we can do. So that's kind of it's a good place to stop because we're basically out of time. But what I want you to take from this is, just one second, I'll let you go, just give me one second. What I want you to take from this is that, we have a long evolutionary history, right? We have lots of common ancestors behind us, and really the further you go back, the more related we are to other things around us, right? And so everything from our skeletal system, our body plan, the way our brains are designed, the way we metabolize food, all of those things we have in common with other creatures, right? Some of the details are different. Some of those details mean that we're able to do things that other animals can't, but we have this kind of common ancestor relationship with other creatures on the planet, right? But that said, we're able to do things that other animals cannot do, right? And that's obvious. And that process kind of starts around 4 million years, right? Right around the time that Artipithecus is living, we probably have one of the first human ancestors that is walking on 2 feet. And as we'll see, walking on 2 feet makes everything else possible for us humans. If we never got up off all fours, probably none of this would have happened, right? So standing on 2 feet, moving around on 2 feet allowed everything else to occur. But I'll try to convey that story to you on Friday, okay? Any questions before I let you go? No? Okay, that's it. I hope you have a nice afternoon. Have a nice rest of the week. I'll see you Friday, okay?